This is Dr. Panda.
Hello, human fellows, I am Dr. Red Panda. As a knowledgeable, handsome, and promising young man, I have also gone through some dark times. Back then, I was addicted to tobacco and alcohol, spending each day in a drunken stupor with a cigarette always in hand. Why did this happen? The reason for a boy's despair is 99% of the time due to heartbreak, and I was no exception. Just picture this, a young boy, not yet free of naivety, cradling a bottle of liquor, a cigarette between his fingers, staring at a photo of his ex-girlfriend, and sobbing loudly. Yes, that was me at that time, a boy who was a slave to nicotine, alcohol, and sexual addictions. So the question arises, why do humans become addicted to so many things? Today, I will take you all to witness the true face of the culprit hidden within our brains that is responsible for addiction. To understand why we become addicted, we first need to look at a famous experiment. In the early 1950s, Dr. James Olds and his team conducted a study with the aim of identifying which parts of the brain were active when rats were stimulated. Due to limitations in the research technology at the time, the method adopted by Olds and his colleagues was quite rudimentary and brutal, involving the direct implantation of electrodes into the rats' brains. When the rats moved to a specific area of the cage, the electrodes would deliver an electric current to stimulate the rat's brain. Although this approach was somewhat primitive, it was indeed effective. However, an accident occurred. The experimenters implanted the electrodes in the wrong place. When these rats received the stimulation, they did not show signs of pain or fear. Instead, they seemed to indulge in the stimulation. This serendipitous mistake led the experiment down a completely new path. Olds and his team quickly modified their experiment, equipping the rats' cages with a wooden lever that, when pressed, would cause the release of an electric shock. The outcome of the experiment was astonishing. Once the rats understood the relationship between the lever and the consequent stimulation, they began to actively press the lever to seek the stimulation themselves. Towards the end of the experiment, the rats started to lose interest in drinking water, eating, and sleeping. However, the frequency with which they pressed the lever skyrocketed to an alarming 2,000 times per hour. Nothing could stop them from pressing the lever and administering electric shocks to themselves, continuing until they reached exhaustion and, ultimately, death. The mysterious reward mechanism. Based on the experiments described above and a series of other experiments, Olds hypothesized that there is a reward system in the brain of living organisms. This system induces and reinforces specific behaviors by producing pleasant emotions. As research continued to progress, people gradually came to understand the true nature of this system. Although complex, the main components of the brain reward system are the ventral tegmental area (VTA) and the nucleus accumbens (NAC) located in the midbrain. These are the same areas where Olds implanted electrodes in the brains of rats. The NAC is responsible for rewarding biological behavior. If the NAC deems a behavior to be good, it will approve the reward for that behavior. The actual release of the reward is then handled by the VTA. The VTA releases a neurotransmitter called dopamine, which produces a sense of pleasure in humans. This is the brain's reward system, and it has a profound impact on our lives and even our survival. What is dopamine? Dopamine is a key neurotransmitter in the hypothalamus and pituitary gland. It is a chemical that helps cells send signals and can affect a person's mood. Swedish scientists Arvid Carlsson and others won the 2000 Nobel Prize for their research on dopamine. This brain-derived hormone is mainly responsible for the brain's libido, sensation, and transmitting information about excitement and happiness. It is also associated with addiction. When we enjoy delicious food, play games, fall in love, or achieve good results, we feel happy because of the release of dopamine. However, this happiness is fleeting. In fact, it is not an exaggeration to describe it as pleasure. Although the reward system ensures that organisms can receive positive feedback from survival behaviors, thus ensuring the health and continuation of the individual, the reward system unexpectedly leads to addiction, weakness, and death in humans. The reward system originally worked in a diverse way. A variety of behaviors such as eating, exercising, listening to music, eating delicious food, socializing, and pursuing personal interests could all trigger the release of dopamine. Under normal circumstances, the level of dopamine secretion would remain in a healthy range. Therefore, people's sense of pleasure could also be maintained in a relatively stable and controllable state. However, humans have gradually discovered that pleasure can be obtained without following the routine of reproduction, eating, and sleeping. Humans have discovered a shortcut to pleasure: addictive substances. These substances, including nicotine, alcohol, opioids, and even caffeine, stimulate the ventral tegmental area (VTA) of the brain at an abnormally high level. The VTA, in turn, releases dopamine at an abnormally high level, which produces a feeling of pleasure that is beyond everyday experience. Any addiction mechanism is related to dopamine in some way. When you are exposed to something that triggers dopamine release, such as smoking, drinking, sex, online gaming, illegal drugs, or text, images, or videos related to them on computers or mobile phones, the dopamine level in your brain will quickly rise. Increased dopamine levels trigger a conditioned reflex learning mechanism. This mechanism automatically remembers the environmental cues associated with the aforementioned objects, just like Pavlov's dog automatically remembers the ringing of a bell when it eats food. In the future, when the cues appear again, the relevant memories will flash instantly and trigger physiological conditioned responses, such as the dog salivating when it hears the bell and having a strong desire to get food. Here's a lighthearted example. After Pavlov completed his experiments, a man went to a bar for a drink. As soon as the bartender poured him a drink, suddenly the phone at the bar rang. He leaped up exclaiming, "Damn, I forgot to feed the dog." Though it's a joke, it really illustrates the point. When we first receive a reward unexpectedly, like getting a gift out of the blue, we immediately feel both excited and pleased because we've obtained something we want. In that moment, happiness and surprise occur simultaneously. However, after repeatedly experiencing the same rewarding situation, such as getting a gift every time we visit a certain store, our brain begins to anticipate. The next time we merely see that store, our brain recalls the previous joyful times and immediately generates the desire for a gift. This is essentially a clever shortcut of the brain. Upon seeing that signal associated with happy memories, the brain releases dopamine, a chemical that makes us feel good. It preempts our joy as if we have already received the gift. Thus, the initial surprise and happiness separate. Now, we first feel yearning, excitement upon seeing the store, followed by gratification, the pleasure of receiving the gift. This is a key reason for addiction. Because once the desire appears and if it's not satisfied, the craving doesn't cease. On the other hand, even when the desire is fulfilled, according to Gosnell's law of hedonic adaptation, the same pleasure, when repeated, brings diminishing returns. Since the enjoyment is no longer novel, the dopamine release triggered by the reward gradually lessens when there is no element of surprise. This is akin to the delight of tasting a delicious cake for the first time. It's simply wonderful. But if you indulge in the same cake every day, the charm swiftly fades. Your brain becomes less sensitive to this stimulation, and as a result, less dopamine is released. To chase that initial euphoria, one might attempt to up the ante by seeking the experience more frequently, increasing the quantity, or hunting for new, more potent forms of excitement. This is why some folks are prone to addiction. They're in pursuit of recapturing that first-time thrill. As time marches on, this pursuit can demand an escalating level of stimulation to attain the same level of satisfaction, leading to an ever-growing dependency. How to escape the control of dopamine. Many people want to return to their previous state, and the good news is that dopamine detox is feasible. This method is known to us as dopamine detoxification. To undergo dopamine detoxification is actually to gradually lower our dopamine tolerance level and avoid receiving dopamine stimulation in daily life. We can choose one day a week to minimize the activities we like to do and that our reward system also encourages us to do. That is to say, on this day, we should try to avoid using the internet and electronic devices, avoid high-calorie diets, and other series of activities that can make people feel pleasure. This day may be very boring, but please accept this boredom to do some things you didn't have time or interest in doing before, like reading a book, cleaning the room, exercising, or going out for a walk. Doing this requires a lot of determination because humans are naturally inclined to pursue behaviors that make them feel pleasure. However, when we feel bored, these activities, which usually do not secrete much dopamine, can also make us feel pleasure. If you're worried that this approach is too radical, you can also insert some pleasurable activities among these behaviors, appropriately stimulate the brain to secrete dopamine, and gradually reduce the body's dopamine levels. If we keep up with this, we will successfully complete dopamine detoxification. Nowadays, people live in cities full of temptations, and the fast-paced and tiring life prompts them to seek pleasure in unhealthy ways. It might be smoking, it could be drinking, but either way, these behaviors are ultimately of no help to us in the long run. They are merely depriving us of our happiness and then giving it back to us little by little. To seek pleasure at the expense of damaging our bodies is a very cruel act. Please let's all make the resolution to direct our attention and pleasure towards activities that truly benefit people around us and ourselves as well. How can I free myself from the torment of addiction to smoking, drinking, and sex? Only women can bring down me, and likewise, only women can make me stand up again. The answer is I've fallen in love again. And that's a wrap for this episode of the video. I'm Dr. Red Panda. If any of you have your own perspectives, or if you think there are any errors in the video, feel free to leave a comment in the discussion section. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. Until next time, take care.